The Seahawks extended their advantage in the NFC West on Sunday with a thrilling 26-21 comeback victory on the road against the Jets. What's been the biggest difference maker for the Seahawks to this point, staying atop the NFC West compared to previous seasons? We're going to be taking a look at why star power matters coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, here on our latest Monday installment. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you are listening down in Sumner, Washington, or if you're over in the middle of the country in Peoria, Illinois. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks improving their record to 7-5 after an ugly yet thrilling road victory over the New York Jets on Sunday. They are now a full game ahead of the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. We'll be taking a look at what might be the biggest difference maker for the Seahawks this year compared to previous seasons as they vie for the first division title since 2020. Plus, we've got our Monday mailbag. We'll be tackling as many questions from you, the valued 12s, as we can, and some Monday musings, in-depth takeaways coming out of yesterday's victory at MetLife Stadium, all brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks now sitting pretty at 7-5 following a not-so-pretty win over the New York Jets on Sunday, a full game ahead of the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC West. They are inching closer. It's far from a done deal, obviously, but inching closer to that first division title since 2020, the COVID season. It's been a while since the Seahawks were atop the division. And obviously, Rob, when you look at where things are at right now, San Francisco has got so many injuries. They just got bullied by the Buffalo Bills in the snow on Sunday Night Football. Christian McCaffrey goes down with another injury. They already were without a number of star players for the rest of the season. Brandon Ayuk, Javon Hargrave. The Rams have had their share of injuries. Arizona, it's tough to tell what Arizona is at this point. They've been as inconsistent as any team in the NFC West. So this is obviously not the juggernaut division that it has been in the last few seasons. But it feels like from Seattle's perspective, it's also worth noting that it seems like the division has been leveled a little bit in terms of leveling the playing field from a star power standpoint, because the Seahawks now have some true, legitimate all-pro talents on this team. And I think there's two players in particular that deserve the most credit for elevating that star power and making this a legitimate contender to win the division this year.
Yeah, I think that's a very well stated. I think that if you want to look at the difference between this season and prior years, Corbin, then, from a national perspective, I think that the most identifiable Seahawks remain Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker III. You want to talk about the guys who have actually just raised their level of play and have actually resulted in Seahawks victories so far this season, then I think you have to start the conversation, of course, with Leonard Williams. And I think you also have to mention a guy like Julian Love, maybe Devin Witherspoon as well. But still, the fact that they're on the defensive side of the ball, I think that, to me, is one of the real storylines here. I mean, obviously, you have Mike Macdonald, who's taken over as the head coach now of the Seahawks. And so there were some expectations that the Seahawks were going to have a little bit more firepower on that side of the football than they had in previous years, with all due respect to the future Hall of Famer, at least in my opinion, that is Pete Carroll. But still, that to me is why everything has changed here in the NFC West. And I kind of bristle at the idea that the NFC West is not strong. I think the fact that you have a division leader in Seattle that has 7 wins and the team that's in the cellar, San Francisco, has 5 wins, but is arguably the most dangerous, most gifted team, at least on paper. I still think that this is a very good division. I just think it's a very equal division, a very even division where the opponents are going to beat up on opponents. Kind of like in college football, everybody talks about how the SEC or the Big Ten reigns supreme just because the level of competition is so good. And it has been so good for so long. To me, that's exactly what the NFC West is. I wouldn't want to play the 49ers or the Rams or the Cardinals in a one-game kind of a playoff situation. And frankly, I don't think that very many other teams in the NFC want to play any of those other teams. But I assure you, they don't want to come to Seattle. Again, the divisional leaders at this point, because the Seahawks, the winners of 3 consecutive games, 2 of them divisional opponents, are rocking and rolling as much as they ever have been under the Mike Macdonald era.
We talked a couple weeks ago about some of the free agency misses for John Schneider this year. That still remains a topic that is worth a discussion because the free agent class has not worked out. You add in Laviska Shenault being waived today. Now you've got another player that you signed in free agency that is no longer on the roster. But when you're looking at the flip side here, you mentioned Leonard Williams, Julian Love, both those moves, bringing those players over, albeit different ways they brought him into town. Julian Love was signed as a free agent, and Leonard Williams was acquired in that blockbuster deal last year. Those stand out as 2 of John Schneider's best moves. And look, some might say this is hyperbole. I don't think it is. I think the trade for Leonard Williams may be the best move that John Schneider has made. And then doubling down and extending him. Look, the numbers are there. You can see them right now coming out of this game yesterday. And we talked about it some on yesterday's postgame show. What Leonard Williams has done the last 2 weeks has never happened in the NFL. Nobody has equaled the stats that he's put up the last 2 weeks, at least since 1970 when the NFL-AFL merger happened. Nobody has matched those numbers. So when Mike Macdonald says he's playing at an all-time elite level, he is not kidding you. I mean, it literally is the only player that's ever done what he's done the last 2 weeks. So he is playing at an incredibly high level, and then he's in the top 10 in sacks, pressures, pass rush win rate. He's been phenomenal against the run. He's second among defensive tackles in tackles for loss this year. Leonard Williams is doing everything that you've got to do to be an all-pro player. He's never even been a second-team all-pro selection, and some have been the bad teams that he's played for in New York with the Jets and the Giants. But this is a team right now that would be the number 3 seed in the NFC. They are playing really well on defense, and 99 is a huge part of it. That trade and the extension, that extension now looks like an absolute bargain with the way that Leonard Williams is playing right now. He's playing like a top 3 defensive tackle with the 11th highest per year salary at the defensive tackle position. And then Julian Love at the safety spot. You might not have the Leonard Williams interception yesterday if not for the hard hit over the middle that forced a pass breakup on the play before that. I mean, they did not get the Jets in 3rd and long very many times yesterday. The Jets were able to set themselves up with 3rd and manageable, 3rd and short situations fairly consistently in this game. They didn't convert on a lot of those, which tells you where Seattle's defense is at right now, but not a lot of 3rd and long situations. That was one of the few, and it turned into that interception, the 92-yard return by Leonard Williams. Julian Love made that play happen to an extent because of the situation the Jets got put in where they were behind the sticks. He had a forced fumble that led to a field goal in the second half, cut the lead down to 2 points. He is playing outstanding football. If you're looking at all-pro candidates, the Seahawks have not had a first-team all-pro player since Bobby Wagner in 2020. It has been a long time since they've had a first-team all-pro player. If I had a vote right now, Julian Love and Leonard Williams would both be getting first-team votes because, to me, they stack up statistically and on film against any safety and defensive tackle in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think that it's true, and I think that you can see that this is not only how Julian Love and Leonard Williams have played so far this season, but there is no reason to suggest that their play is going to drop off at any time soon. I think that, again, to me, one of the most exciting elements of this is the fact that the Seahawks have some defensive players that now you have to kind of game plan against. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, that I think the Seahawks fans should be very excited about this victory over the New York Jets. But just sticking specifically with with Leonard Williams and with Julian Love. And I mentioned Dexter Lawrence there just a moment ago because he is the only defensive tackle who actually leads Leonard Williams in sacks so far this season. Dexter Lawrence has 9 sacks for a 2-win club. Leonard Williams has kind of seized control. He leads the Seahawks in sacks, in tackles for loss, in quarterback hits. I mean, for a defensive tackle, now he leads the team, I guess, in interceptions returned for a touchdown. Of course, Kobe Bryant has one of those as well, but Kobe Bryant's was for 69 yards, and Leonard Williams, big Leonard Williams, ran a 4.97 10 years ago at 4.97 seconds in the 40-yard dash. Again, the fact that he ran that 10 years ago and still looked just as fast, maybe even faster, 17.5 miles per hour, according to some radar detectors out there, again, just is a testament to his athletic ability, the size, his ability to play up and down the defensive line. To me, that is one of the biggest differences for the Seahawks on the defensive side of the ball. And then Julian Love and just his instincts. He's talked about this, so many different times. I mean, the Seahawks have very good safety play. They've almost been synonymous with good safety play here for a decade or two. But with Julian Love, you might be talking about the most instinctive player that they've ever had at that position. That's saying quite a lot when you consider the ball skills that guys like a Eugene Robinson, for example, demonstrated. Certainly the speed, the hitting ability of Earl Thomas or Cam Chancellor. Julian Love is all of those things. He showed the physicality. He's shown the speed. He shows the instincts as well. And to me, he is kind of the sheriff in the secondary that has allowed Seattle to get a little bit more creative, a little bit more exotic. And one of the reasons why it seems like almost every week now that they are creating big play opportunities on defense, whether it be interception, pick sixes, return for touchdowns, fumbles return for a touchdown. Julian Love is a huge part of that. And as you said before, Corbin, I really think that Leonard Williams and Julian Love both deserve legitimate all-pro consideration. And for one of the first times in a long time, I think they're actually going to get that all-pro consideration because the Seahawks, again, are in first place in the NFC West division.
This was something we harped on the last 2 years, that it felt like this team had enough talent that they could sneak into the playoffs, but they didn't have those alpha dogs. They didn't have the star power necessarily to beat the better teams and be able to do damage if they got into the playoffs. Now you've got a number of guys that check off those boxes. Williams, Love, I think you can put Devin Witherspoon in that category as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba is coming for that category. I mean, this is a team that's got some real star power now on the roster that has been missing when they have been good enough to get to the playoffs, but not do anything if they get there. I think you're starting to see things come together that maybe the star power can carry them a little bit further with this particular football team. When we come back, we're going to tackle your questions. It's our Monday mailbag. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Hey, Locked On Seahawk fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, well, let's just say far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift this Christmas season. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They've changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. We're talking kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do. When you clean it, it actually smells and looks clean. Third-party tested, it'll hold ice for 30 or more hours. That is insane. And it's fully customizable. You can send in your own custom logos for your own custom ice shakers. Order your team branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, I wish I had a little bit more time in the heat of the regular season to lift weights and work out. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you most so you can do more of it. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's time to open up our Monday mailbag. We didn't have one last week with the holidays rolling around. We are going to get back to our questions from our valued listeners. And Rob, we're going to go right to the current events, one that you actually did not know about until we were getting ready to record the show. It kind of was under the table today from the Seahawks, but Jason Yee on X, why did the Seahawks cut Laviska Shenault over D. Williams? Seems like Shenault has been the clear-cut better returner outside of yesterday's miscues, and he has also shown some good things on offense as well. This really was the question that all of our listeners were asking. We had tons of questions about this move and why Shenault was the one that was cut instead of D. Williams. You're muted, Rob.
I think it's a great question. I think that, with all respect to the question, and mention that Laviska Shenault has done a lot of great things on offense. Like what? I have not seen a lot of incredible play from Laviska Shenault on offense, and that's been one of the most disappointing things. And not obviously, no question about it, D. Williams hasn't done anything on offensive and defense. He hasn't played a snap on either offensive or defense, and that to me is what this really comes down to. The Seahawks just believe that D. Williams has higher upside in terms of being a return man than they view Laviska Shenault, because Laviska Shenault nor D. Williams are providing anything in terms of anything else for the Seahawks at this point. D. Williams, in my opinion, is a better return man than Laviska Shenault. Now, let's just state the obvious. Laviska Shenault, of course, already has a return for a touchdown, and that was a spectacular play against a very good divisional opponent. No question about it. But at the same time, he also made some critical mistakes. He also is a veteran player who was earning more money. You want to send some waves through the locker room in terms of accountability. Then I think what the Seahawks did at the linebacker position a couple of weeks ago and what they're now doing at the returner position is going to create some waves across that locker room, just prove the accountability. Look, I think that D. Williams put himself in a very vulnerable position with the way that he has played, but I think Laviska Shenault has done the exact same thing. And that's why the Seahawks decided to make the move that they did. They're going with the younger, faster, more explosive football player. Now it is on D. Williams to absolutely seize this opportunity. That's one thing that Mike Macdonald and previously John Schneider have always raved about.
Our next question here coming from Scott Scholes. When the Seahawks face third down and choose to pass, why do they not pass past the yard line to gain? The fourth down conversion to JSN was a very rare exception. So yesterday there were several examples on third down. I think that two of those catches that JSN had that went for 25 yards came on third down. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, that there were not situations where Seattle did not move past the sticks, because there's one that immediately comes to mind where Tyler Lockett settled a yard or two ahead of the sticks, and they ended up having to punt, and that was in the first quarter. So there were some examples where the receivers were not running their routes past the sticks. That certainly is something that the Seahawks can work on, but I don't think that this is the issue that this question is making it out to be. I think, in fact, I would actually argue there were too many times in Sunday's game, and we've seen this in other games, where there were too many long developing plays where Geno Smith did not have that outlet that he could quickly get the football to on third downs, and he had to hold on to the ball and nobody was getting open. There were times they had max protection. You had three receivers going against seven cover guys and nobody's getting open. You wonder why Geno Smith's holding on to the football the way that he is. A lot of times in those plays, the routes are long developing. They're deep downfield. you're not getting those outlets where Geno Smith can quickly dump the ball off. So there were some examples yesterday where Seattle did not run past the sticks, and they maybe could have got a first down if they would have. But I think there are some bigger issues to fry here that I'll be talking about here later in the show, in fact. Our next question from J.M. Harvey: if Leonard Williams continues the dominance he has shown over the past several weeks, could he be in position to take home Defensive Player of the Year? Rob, I think if this question was asked 2 weeks ago, we'd be like, he's just got to be an all-pro first. But look, the dude is returning interceptions, 92 yards for touchdowns. He's getting multiple sacks every game. Like, I think you've got to throw his name in the hat at this point with how he's playing right now.
I 100% agree with you. I think that individual statistics are important. There's an awful lot of sports media folks out there that, frankly, that's all they look at. They don't put much into context. But I think that, one of the biggest reasons why that Leonard Williams has a legitimate chance at this is because the Seahawks are one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. They are one of the more surprising teams, at least to a lot of people. You and I, of course, both picked this Seahawks team to be in the playoff contention deep into this season. So I think that we're not necessarily surprised by what's going on, but a lot of folks are, considering this is Leonard Williams' 10th season in the NFL and that he is playing arguably his best football. I think that is going to be something that's going to create an awful lot of interest. He had a great deal of success with the New York Giants and the New York Jets. Obviously, that's a big media market. Let's just consider the fact, again, Leonard Williams, 10th year. He's had 3 seasons where he had at least 7 sacks. This is one of them. He's had 5 seasons, where he's had at least 10 tackles for loss. Again, this is one of them. He is on pace to beat both his sacks, tackles for loss, and quarterback hits. Greatest seasons he's ever had. And he's being used in such creative, unique ways that the statistics should continue to pile up if the Seahawks continue to play good quality football. So yes, I don't think that it is, overstatement to suggest, hyperbole to suggest that Leonard Williams is going to be in that Defensive Player of the Year consideration. The Seahawks have got to continue rolling. Big number 99 has got to continue rolling. But right now, he is playing as good a football as anybody. Right now, the NFL's leader in sacks is Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got 11.5 sacks. That's great. But the Cincinnati Bengals right now are so far removed from the playoff consideration. I think that you have to kind of narrow your focus to the teams and the players that are actually playing for meaningful snaps here in December and January. Leonard Williams and the Seattle Seahawks absolutely are.
And Hendrickson doesn't have a pick 6. He doesn't have the run defense stats. I mean, Leonard Williams has one of the best stat lines as a run defender this year. He's second among defensive tackles in tackles for loss this year. His average depth of tackle is in the top 12 for defensive tackles, according to Pro Football Focus. I mean, look, this is an award that's all about statistics, and Leonard Williams has never had the flashiest of stat lines, but this year he does. And if he can continue that, then he is very much in this discussion. Zach on Blue Sky, what's the impact of Uchenna Nwosu's return? Is it possible the edge rush could actually get a little worse by folding him in? Who loses their roster spot to fit him in? So first question there is absolutely no way that a healthy Uchenna Nwosu is going to make this pass rush worse. This is a good problem to have, trying to fit number 10 back in. When he's healthy, I still think Uchenna Nwosu is the best edge player for the Seattle Seahawks. It's not Boye Mafe. It's not Derek Hall. It's certainly not Draymond Jones, though I think he's playing better football as of late. Uchenna Nwosu is another guy that when he's healthy can play at an all-pro level. He's got that kind of talent. So I don't think if you asked Mike Macdonald this, I think Mike Macdonald's like, this isn't going to be an issue. We're going to find a way to get him a bunch of snaps. We're going to get him back in the lineup and roll. I would think at this point that Trevis Gibson is probably the one that's the odd man looking out. He's already been a healthy scratch pretty much every game the last 5 or 6 weeks. The Seahawks didn't give up much to get him. I could see that being another case where, look, we don't want to have any more sunk costs. We're just going to move on. So that could be something the Seahawks do. But they do have a roster spot now open with Shenault being released. So they don't necessarily have to make any more moves if Nwosu is going to be activated to the roster, at least at this juncture. Next question from Nick Andron on Blue Sky. In either the second or third quarter, I recall a drive where Ken Walker made some remarkably decisive cuts and just knifed through the defensive line for good gains. What did you see there? Rob, I'm going to let you answer this first, but I've got some intriguing thoughts on this as well.
Well, I can answer it in one word: confidence. I think that Ken Walker III had a little bit greater confidence that he was going to be able to actually attack the line of scrimmage and be able to get through it rather than immediately having to jump cut left or right. I watched the Philadelphia Eagles and Saquon Barkley, another spectacular performance. We're talking about award winners. To me, Saquon Barkley should be the front runner for MVP, at least in my consideration. And part of the reason why, Corbin, is I am watching a guy who struggled for so long behind the New York Jets' woeful offensive line, inability to create any kind of consistent running lanes. And now he's going to Philadelphia Eagles, where he is hitting the hole 100 miles an hour. And so to me, that is when Kenneth Walker III is at his best as well. And so to me, I think that we are seeing some growing confidence among Seattle's running backs. And that's one of the reasons why we saw some explosive runs in this victory against the Jets.
I'm going to use one word too: blocking. There was actually blocking there in front of Ken Walker III, and not in the beginning of the game, and I'm going to get to this more coming up in a few minutes, but it kind of got frustrating in the third quarter because it seemed like the run game was finally going, and then Seattle kind of went away from it once they finally got it going a little bit. But I thought that you saw some really good blocks from Satoa Lamea at the right guard spot. I thought that Laken Tomlinson had a couple nice blocks in this game. Abe Lucas was getting the job done at right tackle. It felt like the between the tackles run game, which I didn't necessarily think the Seahawks were going to be able to do in this game because of Quinnen Williams, some of the guys inside. But they were able to run between the tackles successfully. And with that blocking, as you said, I think you start to see a confident Ken Walker III playing at full speed, full explosiveness, because he was running with that confidence. And he actually had something to work with in front of him. So that's where those cutbacks come into play off those blocks. And it was certainly exciting to see that. When we come back, we are going to dish out our Monday musings, our in-depth takeaways coming out of yesterday's win over the Jets. Don't go away. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action with 5 weeks remaining with FanDuel's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Bet on everything from Jackson Smith and Jigba scoring a touchdown in this weekend's upcoming game against the Cardinals, or DK Metcalf being the first player to have a 30-plus yard reception in Glendale. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch this holiday season and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode is also brought your way by Game Time. You don't need to think about skipping a car payment when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and with their best price guarantee, Game Time takes all the guesswork that comes with buying tickets. If you want to see the Seahawks against the Cardinals at State Farm Stadium on Sunday, you can get seats in the lower bowl for under $65. Great seats without breaking the budget. And Seahawks fans have always traveled well to Arizona. You can join all the other 12s and make some noise as Seattle looks to extend their lead in the NFC West. If you find tickets in the same section of row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks improving to 7-5 with their third consecutive win. This one coming in comeback fashion against the Jets at MetLife Stadium, where the Seahawks have yet to lose a game since MetLife Stadium opened. They are a perfect 7-0 after yesterday's win. There's a lot to talk about coming out of this game, but you and I, we were discussing this before the show. There's kind of this narrative out there that I'm at least seeing on social media that a lot of 12s are not overly excited about this win because, well, the Jets were a 3-win football team. They were 3-8 going into this game. We were down 21-7 at one point in this game. We gave them every opportunity to win it. This certainly is not a game to be excited about, but I am with you that I think it should be the exact opposite. This is the game that a team that has championship DNA finds a way to win, and this team was able to do it. And look, you're still playing 10 a.m. Pacific time. You're still playing a Jets team that, I don't care what the record is, Aaron Rodgers healthier after bye week. They've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. They still were clinging to very slim hopes that they could turn their season around. They had plenty to play for. And yet the Seahawks were able to get it done on a day where they certainly were not throwing their best fastball or anywhere close to their best fastball. They were able to find a way to get it done. And that's exciting on its own accord.
Yeah, and it's a nice sports analogy you just used there. I mean, that's the thing is the Seahawks absolutely did not have their best fastball. They didn't have the best changeup. They didn't have the best curveball. Hell, they were throwing underhand, it felt like, for the first couple of quarters there, and yet they figured it out down the stretch. And it was that resiliency, that belief that they were going to win the game that I think really is a difference, a huge departure from what we've seen from, most of the also-rans in the NFL this year, and frankly, some of the Seahawks teams here of recent years. I mean, let's just consider for a moment the fact that this was a hair away from being a 28-7 kind of a game in the second quarter. And obviously the big interception and return from Leonard Williams completely changed that. But I think that sometimes you focus so much on the big playability of, say, Leonard Williams that you forget how clutch that Geno Smith was at moments in this game. You forget how clutch that Jason Myers, amidst the swirling winds that eventually cost Laviska Shenault his job in that football game, but the Jason Myers continued to be clutch in this game. You forget the fact that the Seahawks now, of all the teams in the NFC West division, and again, I would argue that there are some very talented teams in the NFC West, but it's the Seahawks now who have the defensive players that everybody has to game plan against. You forget the fact that from a national perspective, the very first names that people want to talk about are Geno Smith or DK Metcalf or JSN, and it was Zach Charbonnet and AJ Barner who scored the offensive touchdowns for the Seahawks. So again, you forget about the versatility that is this Seahawks offense. To me, those are some of the most exciting aspects of this football game. They had every reason just to pack their bags and say, hey, it's Thanksgiving week. This is our biggest travel trip of the entire season as far as West Coast to East Coast. And everything was falling apart for this club, and they still come back in first place now, a full game ahead of everybody in first place. As you said, Corbin, I understand when you have a team like the Jets that gave you 12 penalties, 8 in the fourth quarter alone, they basically put it on a silver platter for the Seahawks to take. Good teams will take that silver platter offering. The Seahawks haven't always been a good team, but they are feeling like a better team today than they were, 2 months ago, when there was a lot of people out there who were parading around about the Seahawks' pretty loss to the Detroit Lions. I'm much more excited about this ugly victory against the Wolf of New York Jets squad.
You mentioned the fact the Seahawks got their 2 touchdowns from AJ Barner and Zach Charbonnet. To me, that is a positive coming out of this game, that you had these role players stepping up, especially when you were coming from behind and making those big plays to help orchestrate that 19-point turnaround, 19 unanswered points to end up winning this one by 5. But I want to look at where the offense is at right now, because I still, and this is after watching the All-22, those that listened to the postgame show yesterday, you know that I was not necessarily excited about what I saw on offense from this football team, especially that sequence where they had 8 plays inside the 5-yard line and they didn't score any points. That was one of the worst examples. I mean, that was a textbook definition of wasting a red zone possession. The play calls were undesirable. I didn't understand only running it 3 times on those 8 plays, especially the fact they had been running the ball well for most of that drive. That's why they were in the red zone to begin with. Ken Walker III was starting to roll. They got a big run from Zach Charbonnet on that drive. Why they didn't willingly run the ball, it still feels like Ryan Grubb is trying to figure out what ingredients that he has to put together to get this offense playing anywhere close to peak capacity because there's still way too many possessions that are ending up being empty possessions. And it's not just those red zone issues that they've had. There's too many drives where it just feels like they still are trying to figure out what is our identity. And the play caller has not been able to figure that out yet. So I'm not saying that it's time to give up on Ryan Grubb. It's the opposite of that. I still believe that Ryan Grubb is going to be able to figure this out and make the adjustments that he needs to. But I still think when you look at where this offense is at right now, that would be the reason that I still have some skepticism about where this team is heading if they get into the playoffs. I love the talent there. I don't see an offense, though, where it seems like they have figured out how to maximize the personnel they have. I am encouraged by the fact they ran more under center yesterday, though. That is a positive to me, but there's still a long way to go in terms of Ryan Grubb figuring out what works in the NFL and what stuff that he did at Washington isn't going to carry over against NFL defenses. This is still very much a learning process for him.
No question about it. But you still have 5 more regular season games to go. And so I think that is, a fair assessment of where Seattle is. The fact that they have had the revolving door at the right guard position in particular, I mean, much less at center, at right tackle as well. I mean, 3/5 of your offensive line basically is changing from week to week, and yet you are still in first place in the division. And speaking of the right guard position, look, rest assured, Seahawks fans, you just found yourself your right guard. Satoa Loemea is going to be your starting right guard for the rest of this season, and I think farther than that. And it's not that he was unbelievable against the New York Jets, but at the same time, I think that they have some legitimate talent. And we talked so much about Quentin Williams, Javon Kinlaw, the other defensive tackle there. There were some pancake blocks that Loemea demonstrated in this game. I mean, one in particular against the Jets' leading tackler, number 44, linebacker, good football player, and Satoa Loemea basically put him on the ground, stood over him with a little bit of nastiness that I didn't see, frankly, very often at Utah. I know the Utah Utes have a reputation for having these big physical dominators. Loemea has always struck me as a guy who's a little bit more agile, a little bit more athletic than he is a nasty kind of a player, but that was what he showed in this particular game. That, to me, was one of the most encouraging things. I did see some of that physicality and nastiness. I did see some of the technical play. I saw some of the camaraderie, the rapport that he already showed Abraham Lucas. Some of the best combo blocks I've seen the Seahawks show all season long was Loemea and Abe Lucas, 2 guys who obviously haven't played a lot of football together, but they showed it in this particular football game. So again, to me, Corbin, as I said before, I think this is a victory that Seahawks fans should be very excited about. Now, you have to hold serve. You have to be able to go to Glendale and be able to beat the Arizona Cardinals in this next football game. But what I saw against the Jets, to me, is all the encouragement I need to believe that this is a club that absolutely could be hosting divisional title flag in their stadium here in another couple of months or another couple of weeks.
Real quick, I want to finish on a positive note because obviously on offense, I'm not looking with a all roses, all rainbows a set of glasses. I think this offense still has got a long way to go with 5 games left. There's still time for them to figure it out. But defensively, look, Josh Jobe got picked on some early in the game yesterday. There's no question about that. Aaron Rodgers going after him early. Devin Witherspoon gave up a big play. Reek Woolen gave up a big play. But all 3 of these guys bounced back in the last 3 quarters, and Seattle did not give up a single reception of more than 20 yards. Aaron Rodgers went 0 for 3 on those throws. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams combined for a less than 50% catch percentage and barely over 100 receiving yards. I'll take that any day of the week if I'm playing Aaron Rodgers and those 2 receivers. And it boils down to these corners. They are doing a great job of eliminating big plays. They're playing within themselves, and they're playing with a little bit of chippiness, especially Devin Witherspoon. That's not a little bit of chippiness. He is the textbook definition of chippiness. But Josh Jobe was bringing that a little bit. This secondary really flexed its muscles in those last 3 quarters after the Jets got out to that 14-0 lead and said, nope, you're not scoring any more points on us. A big part of that was the play of those cornerbacks on the outside as well as in the slot. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, it's Tell the Truth Tuesday. We're going to be diving into our final takeaways coming out of Sunday and heading towards a rematch in Glendale against the Arizona Cardinals. We'll also look at how that first game went and what could be different in round 2 between these teams in a quick turnaround. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.